curious about the Persona games for a long time. Persona 5 specifically, I've wanted to play for the past year or so, and I actually just started it as I'm making this video. It took me this long to start for several reasons. For starters, it would have made the Defaultilizer 10 challenge so much harder. Second, it's a PS4 exclusive, and while I have a PS4, it's not as easily accessible to me as my PC and Switch. Third, Persona 5 Royal was coming out soon, so I figured I should wait for that. Finally, with the Persona 4 re-release on Steam, I figured I should get a taste for the series with this shorter, cheaper, and more accessible game before jumping into Persona 5. Anyway, enough about 5. This video is about Persona 4. I remember hearing good things about this one when it first came out, so I was excited to see what all the fuss was about. Overall, I really enjoyed it, but my thoughts are kind of complicated. After all, this game is almost 70 hours long. A lot of thoughts can form in that time. So I'm essentially splitting this review into two segments. The first segment will be the more standard review stuff, talking about the story, gameplay, etc. Afterward, I'm going to talk about my journey playing the game and how my views changed over time. Anyway, let's get right into it. Normally I'd go over story and gameplay separately, but since they're so intertwined here, I'm going to bounce back and forth between the two whenever it fits. The story starts with your character, yeah, he doesn't have a name, getting moved from his home in the city to a small town in the countryside for the year. I don't think we actually know why, but that doesn't matter. In addition to making new friends and getting settled in at school, our heroes discover a mysterious TV program and a parallel world on the other side of the screen. The world is full of monsters called shadows, but luckily the gang can fight them with personas, which is good because someone keeps throwing people into the TV world and it's up to you to save them. One thing I gotta give this story credit for is the beginning. This game's beginning is slow. It takes a couple hours before you start in the first dungeon, but it's not boring. It needs time to introduce a lot of characters and plot points and set the tone, but manages to be engaging while it does so. Anyway, onto the dungeons themselves. Each dungeon looks really samey throughout, but the themes of the various dungeons are distinct from each other. They're pretty simple, having you go through mostly randomly generated floors while fighting enemies and looking for a way to advance. The battle system is complex enough to be interesting, but simple enough for my RPG illiterate brain to understand. You can use your weapon to attack and deal some physical damage, but most of your attacks will come from your persona. You can do stronger physical attacks, which will cost you health, or magic attacks, which cost magic and come in a variety of different flavors. You've got ones that heal, boost stats, and 6 different types of damage. Each enemy has their own strengths and weaknesses to different types of attacks, and the game will conveniently keep track of this for you. On the subject of the personas, they also impact the level up system. While each party member is one persona they stick with throughout the game, yours is always changing. This is because you collect new personas to use throughout the dungeons and can switch between them in battle. As a result, your level is calculated separately from theirs. Your persona's level affects most of their stats, while your level affects your health, magic, and most importantly, the caliber of personas you can summon. You see, your maximum inventory of personas is going to fill up quickly, and they likely won't keep pace with your party's levels. In order to deal with this, you go to the Velvet Room to fuse your personas together, creating stronger ones. There's a lot that goes into it, and while I didn't have the patience or mental capacity to figure out the more complex fusions, I did have fun with the mechanic. One of the nice things about these battles is the way they keep things moving. While you can choose their individual moves, your allies will auto-attack by default, and in my experience, their AI is usually pretty good. They'll sometimes pull off a really powerful attack too, and they'll even give you a choice of whether to execute it. I don't know why you'd say no to knocking out an enemy in one blow, but you do you, I guess. These big attacks aren't entirely random though. If you hit an enemy with their weakness, it'll knock them over, giving you another turn. And if you knock them all over, your party will go to town on them, usually wiping them all out. It's always fun trying to set up these big attacks, and the smaller ones are used in a way that makes them feel like a fun surprise rather than a game-breaking cheat button. Speaking of which, I like what they did with the difficulty. There are 5 main difficulty modes, but they let you customize all the little nuances of the difficulty. Want to make it so both you and the enemies do virtually no damage, making battles drag on forever? I have no clue why you would, but you can if you want to. And yes, there is a mode for those who just want to see the story, but it doesn't let you skip the battles for some reason, just makes it impossible to lose. The dungeons are pretty standard otherwise, aside from a few later ones that require you to backtrack and hunt for keys, which is kind of annoying. The enemy designs also look great. They're really unique and weird, and that goes double for the bosses, who cleverly and somewhat disturbingly manifest parts of the character's personality they're ashamed of. The bosses also tend to be really hard, but maybe that's just me sucking at RPGs. The dungeons are only a small part of the gameplay though. You see, unless you're a masochist or spamming easy mode, you're not going to be able to make it through a dungeon in one go as soon as it becomes available. And you're not meant to. Outside of the TV world, the game will move from day to day. Plenty of days are fully scripted, but most of them let you choose how you spend them. Inaba may be small, but it's densely packed and has a ton of things you can do to pass the time. You can join school clubs to level up certain personality stats, take jobs to earn extra money, read books to acquire new skills, and a whole host of other things. There are even some fetch quests that I never bothered doing, but they're there. The most important activity, though, is leveling up social links. Each social link connects to a different type of persona, and when leveled up, will grant more XP to a persona right after you create it, bypassing the level cap. How do you level up these social links? Well, it's kind of in the name. You spend time with people. Every major character in the game has their own social link. The people you live with, the people in your clubs, some of the people at your jobs, and most importantly, your party members. Leveling up their social link strengthens your personas and theirs. Also, each time you level up the social link, you get a scene of bonding with that character. Which brings me to the game's biggest strength, the characters. This game has a fantastic cast of characters. Every member of your party is great. They have a lot of depth to begin with since you see the shameful hidden side of them before they even join you, but that's just scratching the surface. They're all really likable and work well off of each other. You get to know them so well, both from their social link events, but also over the course of the story. My favorite of the bunch is probably Kanji, although Teddy is a close second due to a late game moment I won't spoil. My least favorite is probably Rise, but she's still pretty damn good. It's just a process of elimination thing. As for the other characters, Nanako and Dojima are great, and the game really makes you want to see them fix their relationship. Adachi's got some charm to him, and even the purely optional characters have some great moments. I never expected the game to make me sympathize with the creepy nurse who hits on teenage boys, but they somehow made it work. Even Tanaka, whose only role in the game is selling stuff on a home shopping network, manages to be really charming. The only character I feel falls flat is Marie. She was added for Golden, and it shows. She's a tsundere and a fish out of water, which isn't automatically bad, but that's all there is to her. She's just a walking cliche, and her social link events feel beyond forced. With the characters taken care of, how about the story? The game is a murder mystery, and I am seriously jealous of the people who played it without knowing who the killer was. But even if you do know, it's still a good story. You can enjoy it knowing full well what the answer is, because so much of the game's focus is on its fantastic cast. Another important thing to note about this game is that it's much less dark than it sounds. Yeah, a string of murders and seeing the shameful hidden sides of your friends is pretty dark, but that's only so much of the story. A lot of the focus is put on you hanging out with your friends and family doing normal teenager stuff. It really works because, like I said before, everyone's super likable and has a great dynamic. This wholesome slice of life content creates a great contrast to all the dark mystery stuff without feeling like a waste of time. Heck, after you beat the final boss, you still have about a month and a half worth of days left, because even though the killers stopped, the game found it important to spend time with your friends before leaving Inaba. My only issue with the story isn't really a problem and more of a disclaimer. There's a moment late in the game where your dialogue choices will affect whether or not you get the good ending. The game actually warns you when you get to this moment, but even still, I recommend looking up a walkthrough when you get to December 3rd. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say for the story and gameplay. Now for the presentation. The presentation does a great job overall. The graphics aren't amazing, but considering this was originally on the PS2, they're pretty good. The resolution is clear, the environments feel lively, and while the character models feel a bit archaic, they get the job done just fine and even have a bit of charm to them. They mostly work because the character portraits for dialogue are all detailed, well-designed, and expressive. The voice acting is great too. The game isn't fully voiced for kind of obvious reasons, but all the important moments are voiced. The music is nice, and most importantly, it's the kind of music you won't get tired of. You hear most of these tracks quite a bit over the course course of your 70-hour campaign, and they never overstay their welcome. The interface is also clear and fairly stylish, although maybe I'm biased since yellow is my favorite color. Okay, I'm clearly grasping here, so we might as well move on to the more personal side of this review. Going through Persona 4 really felt like a journey for me. In 2020, I was getting all kinds of mixed signals as to whether or not I liked RPGs, so I wasn't sure what to expect. I started on easy mode, figuring that was the best bet, given my general incompetence with this genre. When I first got to Yukiko's dungeon, I decided to blitz through it in one go, but eventually the constant battling got to me, and I had to stop. Luckily, that seemed to be what I was supposed to do. I also noticed I was really getting the hang of the battle system, so I switched to normal and started doing the fights normally. I set up a system where I would go into a dungeon and keep advancing floors until either the enemies start getting too strong, I run out of magic, or I run out of space for personas. Then I would leave for a few days and do some other stuff to strengthen my character until there's a good stopping point for me to go back in. I really got hooked on the day-to-day time management stuff, and the dungeon crawling was fine in short bursts. I stayed on normal for a while, with the exception of the bosses. Once I got to Shadow Kanji, I knew I would have to cheat to win. I didn't want to, but since he had an attack that insta-killed my entire party, I felt like I had no choice. I did the same for all the major bosses afterward, and by all of them, I mean Shadow Risei and Teddy. You see, that sweet spot I was in with this game was a very delicate balance. Add one more layer of complication and it would all come crashing down. That's exactly what happened with Mitsuo's dungeon. I got up to the top floor, left for the day, and when I came back, I realized the door was locked. I looked up what I had to do, and it turns out I had missed a boss on a previous floor, which was news to me since I assumed these were purely linear gauntlets of enemies. I didn't think there was any exploration or puzzle solving involved. So I backtracked, beat the boss, and eventually turned easy mode on because I had already made it through these floors and didn't want to deal with them again. Then I stopped at the boss because I wanted to do a bit more prep work before jumping into it. I was still frustrated from all the backtracking and wasn't eager to get back to the dungeon, which caused me to drag my feet and misread some cues the game gave me that seemed vague but probably should have been obvious. So I missed the deadline to rescue Mitsuo, and Igor sent me back a week, which would have been annoying normally, but that time skip undid all the backtracking and unbacktracking I did in the dungeon, and since I hadn't saved since doing that, I was screwed. An entire night's worth of progress undone just like that. I had no choice. I had to do the already repetitive process of backtracking all over again. This made me snap. Before this point, I was honestly considering putting the game above Bug Fables. I still think Bug Fables would have won out in the end, but it would have been close. Now, I didn't even want to finish the game despite desperately wanting to see the rest of the story and still enjoying the time management stuff. I was in such a bad place, I made this just a vent. But then I realized a way around all of this. Very easy mode. Not only was it, well, very easy, but it even lets you retry battles when you lose and has the enemies retain their damage. Now, I could blitz through every dungeon without even needing to pay attention to the battles. And that's exactly what I did. I never went back to normal difficulty because this made for a much more relaxing experience. Unfortunately, this came with a major drawback. Since I wasn't doing battles anymore, the time management had no stakes, as I was going to win no matter what. Leveling up my personality stats was still fun, and the social link events were good for their own sake, but a lot of the appeal of the time management was now gone. Of course, this could be fixed by doing the battles normally, but I didn't want to go back to that either now that I'd gotten a taste for not having to deal with them. I was stuck in a catch-22, which I'll fully admit was largely my fault, but it still seriously impeded my enjoyment of the gameplay. It really made me wish there was a game that was fully built around Persona's time management mechanics, but still managed to have stakes. Then I remembered Beholder 2 exists, so my wish was granted about 2 years before I made it. I still enjoyed the gameplay though, just not nearly as much, and the story was just as great as ever. It was still a really good experience, just not as good as in the beginning. I'll admit, part of me was eager to finish the game toward the end, but I can chalk that up to playing only this game for so long instead of taking breaks, a mistake I will not make with Persona 5. So, as a whole, I really enjoyed Persona 4 Golden. I didn't like everything about it, which I guess is to be expected since it's an RPG, but I still found myself getting disappointed by that fact. In the beginning, I was expecting something better, but this is still pretty damn good. I am Defoffilizer, and don't expect to see a Persona 5 Royal review anytime soon. That game might be the longest one I ever play, and I want to take a couple breaks to make sure I don't get sick of it. Not because it's subpar, but because playing any game for 100 hours can get tiring. Bye!